Imagine a world where history took a different turn. 66 million years ago, the sky carried a visitor, a rock larger than Mount Everest, drifting silently through space, pulled by gravity onto a collision course with Earth. In our timeline, it struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, releasing more energy than billions of atomic bombs. That single day brought the age of the dinosaurs to a sudden end and opened the door for mammals, and eventually for us. But imagine it missed. Imagine that giant rock slid past by a fraction of a degree, continuing on into the black ocean of space. No firestorms, no darkened skies, no years of cold and hunger. The dinosaurs lived on. The story of life was never reset, and Earth, as we know it, became something altogether different. Before we step into that alternate Earth, take a moment to let your thoughts slow. Get comfortable. Notice your breathing. Allow the noise of the day to fade like dust settling after a storm. In this first chapter, we are going to sink into the story of the asteroid that never struck and gently open our minds to what survival on that day might have meant. The asteroid that ended the dinosaurs was about 10 kilometers wide. Small when compared to the size of our planet, yet unimaginably destructive. It entered the atmosphere faster than a bullet, glowing brighter than the sun. Within seconds, the world below was forever changed. The ground shook with an impact so violent it vaporized rock, carved a crater 150 kilometers across, and triggered earthquakes felt across continents. The air itself caught fire. Forests thousands of kilometers away burned. But the true devastation wasn't in the blast. It was in the aftermath. Dust, ash, and vaporized minerals rose into the atmosphere and circled the globe, forming a shroud that blocked the sun. For months, perhaps years, sunlight could barely reach the surface. Temperatures dropped. Plants which fed on light began to die. Without plants, herbivores starved. Without herbivores, predators soon followed. It is hard to picture just how sudden it was. Dinosaurs had ruled the planet for more than 150 million years. They had survived countless smaller extinctions, climate shifts, and continental breakups. They were not fragile, they were not destined to fall. But in the shadow of that asteroid, their world collapsed almost overnight. More than 3/4 of all species disappeared. Mosasaurs in the oceans, pterosaurs in the skies, Triceratops on the plains, tyrannosaurs in the forests. All gone. What we call the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction, or KPG event, was both an ending and a beginning. Mammals, who had lived mostly in the shadows, small, quick, and cautious, suddenly found themselves in a world with space to grow. They expanded into niches the dinosaurs had left behind. Some grew larger, some learned to swim, some to climb, some eventually to think. In time, primates appeared, and much later, humans. But none of that was inevitable. There was nothing written in stone that said the asteroid had to hit. If it had missed by mere minutes, Earth would have continued along the path it had been on. Dinosaurs still the dominant life forms, mammals still small and hidden. Perhaps humanity would never have existed. Picture the Earth as it was in the final days before the asteroid. The continents were drifting into the shapes we know, though not yet finished. North America was divided by a shallow inland sea. Europe was scattered into islands. The climate was warmer, with lush forests stretching even near the poles. It was a world alive with green, a greenhouse planet. On the land, herds of hadrosaurs grazed like vast armies of giant deer. Their heads were decorated with crests, which they may have used to call to one another in deep, resonant sounds. Sauropods, immense long-necked dinosaurs, moved in slow herds across floodplains, their necks sweeping from treetop to treetop. In the shadows, predators waited. Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the last and most powerful of its kind, stalked silently, its senses sharpened, its bite strong enough to crush bone. Raptors, smaller but cunning, hunted together, weaving through ferns and cycads. Above, the skies belonged to pterosaurs, some with wingspans greater than a small plane, and mingling with them were early birds, their feathers already carrying hints of the bright colors we see today. The oceans, too, teemed with giants. Mosasaurs, serpentine marine reptiles, ruled the seas. Sharks swam alongside them. Ammonites, shelled creatures related to squid, drifted in endless swirls. Coral reefs thrived in tropical waters. It was a vibrant, noisy, living world. If you could stand on a cliff overlooking a Cretaceous valley, you would have heard the calls of hadrosaurs echoing like horns, the splash of reptiles sliding into rivers, the whoosh of wings overhead. Birds would have stretched to the horizon. Shadows of predators would have moved silently among the trees. It was a planet at its peak, thriving, filled with energy. Now imagine the asteroid never came. The sky remains blue, the forests unburned, the seas calm. Dinosaurs continue their daily rhythms, feeding, hunting, soaring. Evolution doesn't pause. With every generation they adapt a little more, change a little more. The world keeps unfolding, not toward us, but toward something else entirely. Extinction events are Earth's way of resetting the stage. They clear the board and the survivors begin again. Before the dinosaurs rose, there was another catastrophe, the Great Dying, at the end of the Permian period. It erased about 90% of all life. It was out of that silence that dinosaurs eventually emerged. In our world, the asteroid was their ending, and mammals became the next rulers. But in this alternate history, the reset never came. The age of dinosaurs simply continued. Think about survival. We often picture it as the reward of strength or intelligence. But survival is often just chance. A species can thrive for millions of years and still vanish in a single season of bad luck. The asteroid's arrival was bad luck for the dinosaurs and unimaginable good luck for us. Your life, everything you know, rests on a rock falling at the right place at the right time. Had it been slightly later or slightly earlier, Earth's story would have continued without us. This is where the imagination begins. If the asteroid had missed, dinosaurs would have gone on adapting. Some species might still have disappeared, as all species do, but others would have flourished. Mammals would have stayed small, scurrying in the shadows. There would have been no vast open spaces for them to fill, perhaps no whales in the oceans, no elephants on the plains, no humans anywhere. And yet, in the stillness of this thought, there is a sense of awe. The idea that everything we are, our languages, our cities, our music, our memories, exists because of a single moment in deep time, a collision that in another version of history never came. The more we look at this moment in history, the clearer it becomes that life's story is written in chance. The asteroid's arrival shaped every breath we take today, but in the version we are imagining, its absence rewrites the script entirely. To understand just how different things might have been, we need to look closely at the chain of events that followed in our own reality, and then gently untangle them. When the asteroid struck, fires raged across continents. Soot and ash climbed into the atmosphere. The oceans, warmed by the sudden release of energy and poisoned by chemicals, turned against many of the creatures that lived there. Tiny plankton died in staggering numbers, and with them, much of the food web collapsed. Acid rain fell, corroding leaves, harming freshwater life, and weakening the balance of entire ecosystems. In our timeline, this cascade of destruction opened empty spaces in nature. When the dinosaurs disappeared, ecosystems were broken like shattered glass. Into those spaces, mammals expanded. They grew in size, learned new behaviors, and spread into roles dinosaurs had once held. It was the beginning of their age. But in the alternate Earth where the asteroid missed, that cascade never happened. The forests kept growing, the oceans kept thriving, and the food chains remained strong. Dinosaurs didn't vanish. They kept their roles at the top of nearly every environment. Herds of plant eaters continued to shape the land, stripping leaves, trampling paths, and creating open spaces in forests, just as elephants do today. Predators continued to stalk them, ensuring the balance between populations. Even the oceans would have remained under reptilian rule, with mosasaurs still patrolling the seas. Think for a moment about what that means. The great mammals we know, the lions, elephants, whales, would likely never have appeared. With dinosaurs still filling the roles of grazers and hunters, mammals would remain small. They might have stayed nocturnal, living in burrows or trees, never growing into the large, visible forms we see today. Without space to rise, they would have remained background players in a stage dominated by reptiles. And yet, nature never stands still. Even without the asteroid, Earth would have kept changing. The continents would still drift, mountain ranges would still rise and crumble, climates would still shift, from warm greenhouse worlds to cooler periods. Dinosaurs would need to adapt, just as they always had. Some species might have shrunk, others might have grown, and still others could have evolved entirely new forms. Evolution is endless, and in this alternate story, it would have been written with dinosaurs as the main characters. There is a question that scientists and dreamers alike have asked. Could dinosaurs have ever developed intelligence similar to ours? Paleontologist Dale Russell once suggested that a species of small, clever raptors might have eventually evolved into a being with larger brains and upright posture, something he called the Dinosauroi. It was only a thought experiment, but it reminds us that evolution doesn't have a fixed goal. If birds, the only living dinosaurs, can learn complex songs, build intricate nests, and even solve puzzles, it's not unreasonable to imagine that other dinosaurs, given millions more years, might have reached forms of intelligence beyond what we can picture. Even if they never grew human-like minds, their presence alone would have kept Earth a very different place. Imagine standing on a grassy plain, though perhaps it would not be grass, but giant ferns and cycads still covering the land. On the horizon, a herd of Triceratops grazes, their horns glinting in the sun. In the distance, a predator moves, silent and steady, its shadow long across the ground. Above you, wings cast moving patterns across the sky, pterosaurs gliding in search of fish. This is not a scene from a museum exhibit or a film. In this alternate Earth, it is daily life. It's worth remembering that the Earth itself is not sentimental. It does not keep careful records for us. Bones dissolve, wood decays, and even stone wears down. The fact that we know as much as we do about the Cretaceous world is remarkable. Fossils are rare, formed only when conditions align perfectly. Rapid burial, mineral-rich water, protection from erosion, most life leaves no trace. And yet, enough has survived that we can sketch a picture of the world the dinosaurs knew. In the reality where the asteroid never struck, that picture would simply have kept being drawn. There's something humbling about this thought. We often imagine ourselves as the inevitable outcome of evolution, as though intelligence and technology were always going to appear. But nothing about our existence was guaranteed. If the asteroid had missed, dinosaurs would still be here, and we very likely would not. The music we know, the languages we speak, the memories we hold, might never have existed at all. And yet, as you let this idea drift through your mind, notice how strange and delicate our reality is. The entire human story depends on a single day in deep time, a moment when the Earth shuddered, burned, and then slowly began again. It could so easily have been different. That is what makes this thought experiment powerful. It reminds us that life is fragile, and chance shapes more than we realize. If you let yourself imagine it fully, you can almost feel that other Earth pressing close, as though somewhere, in a parallel possibility, the sound of hadrosaurs calling still echoes through humid air, and the footsteps of tyrannosaurs still shake the ground. In that world, mammals never claimed the stage. Humanity never arrived. The story belongs to the dinosaurs. As this chapter closes, let the image settle in your mind. Not the fiery end of the dinosaurs, but their survival. A world unbroken, carrying forward without interruption. The age of dinosaurs stretching onward, not as fossils in stone, but as living rulers of Earth. In the chapters ahead, we'll step deeper into that imagined reality, walking through forests they still shape, skies they still fill, and oceans they still command. For now, rest with the thought of what might have been, the day the dinosaurs didn't die. Imagine walking through a world where the dinosaurs never left. The forests are thick with giant ferns and towering conifers. Sunlight filters down through broad leaves, painting shifting patterns of gold and green on the forest floor. In the distance you hear a low rumble, not thunder, but the footsteps of something alive, something massive. This is a planet where the age of dinosaurs never ended. where ecosystems evolved under their rule, not ours. To picture this world, it helps to understand what an ecosystem is. An ecosystem is simply life in balance. Plants, animals, air, water, and soil, all linked together. In our timeline, modern ecosystems are shaped by mammals. Elephants open paths in forests. Beavers reshape rivers. Whales stir nutrients in the oceans. But in a dinosaur world, those roles would belong to entirely different creatures. Their size, their habits, their very presence would keep Earth systems running in ways both familiar and completely alien. On the open plains, you would find herds of herbivorous dinosaurs moving like living landscapes. Triceratops with their 3 sharp horns and great frilled skulls gather in groups for safety. Like bison or wildebeest today, they graze together, leaving flattened grasslands in their wake. Their horns are not only for defense but also for display, signals of strength and status that keep order within the herd. A predator watching them would think twice before charging into a forest of horns. Among them move hadrosaurs, the so-called duck-billed dinosaurs. They travel in huge numbers, their nasal crests resonating with haunting calls that can carry for miles. Their movement shapes the land, trails carved by millions of feet, riverbanks worn by their drinking, vegetation cut down in sweeping arcs. Where they move, new plants sprout in the clearings, feeding insects and smaller creatures. Overhead, the skies are alive with the shadows of pterosaurs. Some skim the rivers, snapping up fish with beak-like jaws. Others soar higher, riding thermal currents like eagles. Birds, too, still exist, for birds are themselves dinosaurs, small survivors of the lineage that continued no matter what. But in this world, they are not the last branch of a vanished family. They are part of a living dynasty, sharing the skies with their colossal cousins. And always, somewhere in the background, there is the predator. Tyrannosaurus rex remains a figure of awe. In our history, it lived in North America at the very end of the Cretaceous, a hunter with teeth the size of bananas and a bite strong enough to crush bone. In this alternate Earth, predators like T-Rex would have kept evolving. They would not roam alone in museums as skeletons, but alive, moving through forests, following herds. Their presence would define the behavior of every other creature. Herbivores would gather closer, always alert, while scavengers would follow behind, waiting for scraps. Predators are the balance keepers of ecosystems. They do not simply destroy, they shape. By hunting the weak or the unwary, they strengthen the herd as a whole. By moving prey, they shape the land itself. Imagine how the presence of something like T-Rex would change the rhythm of a grassland. Herds would bunch tightly, moving together in waves. Smaller animals would dart into burrows. Even plants would be affected, because grazers constantly on the move leave patches of land open for new growth. The oceans too would feel this difference. Without the extinction, the seas might still be home to mosasaurs, marine reptiles stretching more than 15 meters long. They were the apex predators of their time, swallowing fish, turtles, and even other mosasaurs. Alongside them, giant sharks would hunt, while ammonites, those coiled shell-bearing creatures, would still drift in colorful spirals. Coral reefs would not only shelter fish, but also tremble with the shadows of reptiles passing overhead. Consider how different the planet itself would look if shaped by these creatures for another 66 million years. Large herbivores like sauropods, with necks as long as buses, may have continued to exist, stripping forests bare in their search for food. Just as elephants opened savannas by knocking down trees, sauropods could have created vast clearings, landscapes patterned by their movements. Rivers may have shifted under their weight. Whole valleys could have been shaped by their migrations. Even the climate would be touched. In our timeline, mammals like bison or wildebeest drive cycles of growth and regrowth across grasslands. In a dinosaur world, the same role would belong to hadrosaurs or ceratopsians. Their endless grazing would release carbon from plants, their movement spreading seeds across wide distances. With creatures of such size, the Earth's atmosphere itself might carry a slightly different balance of gases. Life in these ecosystems would not be quiet. Imagine standing by a river as dawn breaks. From the forest edge comes the trumpeting call of a hadrosaur herd. Water splashes as a group of smaller dinosaurs wade in to drink, scattering fish. Overhead, the air vibrates with the wing beats of pterosaurs. The ground trembles with the approach of a sauropod, its shadow stretching over the riverbank. Then, silence. As if the land itself holds its breath, a predator steps into view. This is a living world, one in which every action echoes through the system. Just as wolves in Yellowstone shape rivers by controlling deer populations, so too would tyrannosaurs shape the flow of life. Just as elephants keep African landscapes open, Triceratops herds would keep forests trimmed. Dinosaurs were not simply large reptiles, they were engineers of ecosystems, shapers of the very land beneath their feet. It is easy to imagine them as monsters, but they were not. They were part of nature's balance, as important to their worlds as bees are to pollination or trees to oxygen. They were the gears that kept the system turning. In this alternate Earth, those gears never stopped. The age of dinosaurs became the fabric of life itself, woven through every forest, river, and ocean. If dinosaurs had never vanished, the Earth would not only look different in its plains and forests, but in every corner of its surface. Each region, from the tropics to the poles, would carry their mark. Ecosystems are like songs played by many instruments, and in this version of the world, dinosaurs provide the deep, resonant notes that everything else must follow. In the jungles near the equator, the air is thick with heat and humidity. Towering trees stretch toward the sun, their trunks wrapped in vines, their branches crowded with broad leaves. In our timeline, these jungles are home to primates swinging through the canopy, insects humming in clouds, and cats stalking silently on the ground. But here, in the dinosaur world, the story unfolds differently. Herds of smaller, herbivorous dinosaurs, perhaps the descendants of iguanodonts, graze in the shadows, feeding on low plants. Their movement creates open patches where sunlight reaches the forest floor, allowing new growth to flourish. Birds call out overhead, but they are joined by feathered dinosaurs, some climbing, some gliding, each filling a role mammals might have taken in our world. Among the ferns, predators wait. Not the jaguars of our jungles, but sleek, raptor-like hunters, using sharp senses to stalk their prey. They communicate with one another through clicks, chirps, or even flashes of color on feathers. Their strategies keep the herds alert, always moving, always cautious. Without them, the jungle would grow too crowded. With them, balance remains. Move to the deserts, and the story is different again. In our timeline, camels, foxes, and lizards survive the harsh conditions. In the dinosaur world, desert ecosystems are shaped by creatures adapted to heat in reptilian ways. Imagine herds of ceratopsians traveling from oasis to oasis, their frilled heads decorated with colors to impress one another, their horns used to defend against predators in the open sands. Small, fast dinosaurs dart across the dunes, much like gazelles do today. Even in such a dry place, life finds its rhythm. Reptilian scavengers follow behind, feeding on what the desert leaves behind. The polar regions too hold surprises. We often imagine dinosaurs only in warm climates, but fossils tell us that some lived near the poles, enduring months of darkness and cold. In this alternate Earth, that adaptation would continue. Picture forests of conifers dusted with snow, with herds of plant-eating dinosaurs digging for roots beneath the frost. Their bodies, covered in insulating feathers or thick hides, keep them alive through the long winters. Predators, lean and patient, follow their migrations, just as wolves follow caribou today. These are not creatures frozen out of existence, but adapted rulers of the cold. And then there are the oceans, vast and unending. Without the extinction, the seas might still roar with mosasaurs, their streamlined bodies cutting through waves, their jaws snapping shut around shoals of fish. Smaller marine reptiles, perhaps evolved from ancient plesiosaurs, might glide through the water with long necks and paddle-like fins. Sharks, always survivors, would still be there too, but not alone at the top. Whales would never appear, for mammals would remain small. Instead, oceans would belong entirely to reptiles, their shadows gliding over coral reefs, their hunts stirring the balance of the deep. Insects and smaller creatures also play their part. In our world, bees and butterflies are crucial for pollination, helping plants reproduce. In a dinosaur world, insects would still be there, but their interactions might differ. Large herbivores could spread seeds over great distances, carrying them on their hides or in their droppings. Forests would grow and regrow under the feet of sauropods and ceratopsians, constantly renewed by their movement. Every bite, every step, every migration shapes the fabric of life. Food chains in this world work as they do in ours, but with different players. Plants capture sunlight, growing into leaves, stems, and fruits. Herbivores consume them, their vast bodies converting plants into energy. Predators then feed on herbivores, and scavengers clean what remains. Nothing is wasted. Even dung becomes a resource, feeding insects and enriching the soil. In this alternate Earth, dinosaurs are the pillars holding up these chains, their presence echoing from the smallest beetle to the tallest tree. What's striking is how these systems create landscapes over time. Consider elephants. In Africa, by knocking down trees, they create savannas where other animals thrive. Dinosaurs would do the same, but on an even grander scale. A herd of sauropods could open entire valleys, turning dense forests into open plains. Triceratops herds might carve permanent paths that shape the flow of rivers. Over millions of years, the geography of continents would reflect their presence. They are not just part of ecosystems, they are architects of them. Even the night in this world feels different. As the sun sets over a swamp, the air fills with the chorus of insects. But instead of frogs croaking or coyotes calling, you hear the low, resonant sounds of hadrosaurs echoing across the water. Their calls are deep and haunting, rolling through the mist like the notes of ancient horns. Somewhere in the darkness, a predator shifts, its footsteps muffled in the mud. The balance of life continues, shaped by rhythms older than our species, older even than mammals. To live in a world still ruled by dinosaurs would be to live with giants, but also with an endless variety of forms, from the smallest feathered hunters to the largest plant eaters ever to walk the land. Each ecosystem, jungle, desert, polar forest, or ocean, would bear their signature. Each would hum with life carried forward from the Cretaceous, never interrupted by extinction. As you let this picture settle in your mind, you can almost feel the Earth breathing differently. Every corner of the planet, every ecosystem, shaped by creatures that in our world exist only as bones in stone. In this imagined Earth, they still walk, graze, hunt, and soar, keeping balance in ways that feel both familiar and utterly strange. And from this foundation, we can begin to wonder, how would evolution have carried them forward? What new forms would they have taken? What possibilities were lost when the asteroid fell? Those questions will guide us as the story deepens. Evolution is change written over time. It does not happen suddenly, nor does it follow a plan. It is a slow drift, like a river wearing down stone, shaping creatures with each generation. In our world, the asteroid reset that process. Dinosaurs, except for the branch that became birds, were erased, and mammals took the stage. But in this alternate Earth where the asteroid never struck, that slow drift would have continued in their favor. The first thing to understand is that dinosaurs were not static. They were not one kind of creature frozen in place for millions of years. They were diverse, ever-changing, spread across every environment on the planet. Some were the size of chickens, others heavier than entire herds of elephants. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4. Some grazed peacefully while others hunted with teeth like knives. If we give them 66 million more years of evolution, the variety becomes almost impossible to imagine. Start with the herbivores. The great sauropods, long-necked giants, were already marvels of biology. Their necks allowed them to strip leaves from the highest trees, their sheer size protecting them from most predators. In our reality, they had already been declining by the late Cretaceous, perhaps because ecosystems were changing. But if they had survived, they might have evolved into new forms, some even larger, others smaller and more agile. Some could have adapted to grasslands, using shorter necks and sturdier bodies. Others might have taken to wetlands, their long limbs allowing them to wade through rivers and swamps like living bridges. Triceratops and its relatives, with their horns and frills, were another group with endless possibilities. Their head crests were not only shields but displays, perhaps used for signaling, mating, or even recognition. Over millions of years, these crests could have become more elaborate, sprouting shapes and patterns like the antlers of deer. Herds of brightly ornamented ceratopsians might have roamed open plains, their horns gleaming in the sunlight, their frills decorated with colors only visible in the right light. The hadrosaurs, or duck-billed dinosaurs, were known for their vocal abilities. Their hollow crests acted like instruments, producing deep, resonant sounds. If they had continued to evolve, they might have developed even more complex communication, perhaps rivaling the songs of whales or birds. Imagine herds spread across a valley, their calls blending into harmonies, carrying across miles. Communication is often the first step toward complex social structures, and in these creatures the seeds of something remarkable were already present. And then, of course, there were the predator. Tyrannosaurus rex was already one of the most specialized hunters to ever live, with incredible senses of sight and smell, and a bite that could crush through bone. But evolution rewards adaptation. Given more time, predators like T-Rex might have branched into different forms, some smaller, faster, built for chasing quick prey across open ground. Others larger still, with heavier skulls and more crushing power, true apex hunters of their time. Raptors, with their sharp claws and pack behavior, might have evolved into even more intelligent hunters, their cooperation refined into strategies resembling those of wolves or lions today. The seas, too, would not have been quiet. Mosasaurs dominated the oceans in the late Cretaceous, their long bodies slicing through the water, their jaws filled with sharp teeth. With another 60 million years, they might have split into multiple lineages. Some could have grown to truly colossal sizes, rivals to the whales that never appeared in this world. Others might have adapted to coastal waters, smaller, faster, darting through reefs like oversized barracudas. Imagine standing on a shore and seeing a shadow pass beneath the waves. Not a whale, but a reptile with eyes just below the surface, watching. Flying reptiles, the pterosaurs, were already diverse. Some had wingspans greater than a small airplane. With time, they might have become even more specialized. Some could have evolved into swift aerial predators, locking their wings to dive at speeds rivaling falcons. Others might have become scavengers, soaring for days across oceans, following herds and predators, waiting for leftovers. Birds, too, would still be part of this world, but they would not dominate the skies alone. Instead, they would live in a shared realm, forced to adapt alongside their reptilian cousins. One of the most fascinating questions is intelligence. In our reality, mammals eventually produced primates, and primates produced humans. But intelligence is not limited to one path. Birds today are capable of remarkable problem-solving. Crows use tools. Parrots remember and mimic complex sounds. Dinosaurs, especially raptors, already showed signs of higher brain function. If given tens of millions of years, it is not impossible that some could have taken steps toward greater intelligence. In the 1980s, a paleontologist named Dale Russell proposed a thought experiment. He imagined what a dinosaur called Troodon, a small bird-like predator, with large eyes and a relatively big brain for its body size, might have become if it had kept evolving. His hypothetical creature was upright, with grasping hands, large eyes, and a big skull. He called it the Dinosauroid. It looked uncannily like a reptilian version of a human. Scientists have debated this idea, many criticizing it as too human-centered. Evolution rarely repeats itself so neatly. Still, the experiment highlights a point. Intelligence was already flickering in some dinosaurs. With enough time, those sparks could have grown into something bright. Even if no dinosaur ever built cities or tools, they might have developed advanced behaviors, cooperative hunting, complex social bonds, even cultural transmission, the passing of learned behaviors from one generation to the next. Think of elephants, who remember routes to water and pass them on, or whales, whose songs vary from group to group like dialects. Dinosaurs, too, could have developed traditions, ways of living passed through time. their world might not have been filled with machines, but with intelligence expressed in other ways, in communication, cooperation, and memory. The idea may sound like science fiction, but it is built on science itself. Evolution does not stop. Given time, small changes add up to great ones. The dinosaurs we know from fossils were snapshots in a much longer story. If the asteroid had missed, that story would still be unfolding, written in the footsteps of giants across a living Earth. To imagine evolution continuing without interruption, you need only look at how life has changed in the time since the asteroid fell. In the 66 million years that followed, mammals grew from shrew-sized creatures into whales that weigh more than 150 tons, into elephants, bats, monkeys, and humans. Every shape we see today, from dolphins to giraffes, arose in that span of time. Now turn that clock back, remove the asteroid, and place dinosaurs in that space. The possibilities stretch beyond anything we can truly picture. Geography plays a central role. The continents have not stayed still since the late Cretaceous. They have drifted, collided, split apart. Mountains have risen, oceans have opened, climates have shifted between ice ages and greenhouse phases. Dinosaurs living through all of this would have been pushed to adapt. Populations separated by oceans might have grown into entirely new forms, just as isolated islands today shape their inhabitants into unique creatures. Picture an island chain in the tropics where small raptors evolve into specialized fish hunters, sprinting across tidal flats with long, narrow jaws like herons. Far away, in colder lands, a different branch grows, feathers thick as fur, insulating them against icy winds, their eyes larger to see in months of darkness. Climate too would leave its mark. As ice sheets advanced and retreated, some dinosaurs might have grown compact, stocky forms to conserve heat, while others expanded into tall, long-limbed shapes in warmer regions. Diversity is nature's answer to challenge. Where mammals diversified into cats, dogs, bears, and primates, dinosaurs could have filled the same range with reptilian forms. Hunters built for speed, grazers built for endurance, climbers built for height. Each region of Earth might have had its own cast of dinosaur life, adapted to its rhythms. In the seas, the story would be even more dramatic. Without whales, seals, or dolphins, marine reptiles would have continued their dominance. Mosasaurs might have grown into the role of deep divers, capable of plunging far below the surface to hunt giant squid, echoing what sperm whales do today. Others could have become filter feeders, sweeping plankton from the water with comb-like teeth, their immense bodies drifting slowly through the oceans as living ships. Along coastlines, smaller species might have learned to leap from the water like penguins, blurring the line between reptile and bird. Coral reefs, shaped by their presence, would hum with different rhythms, their balance maintained by the shadows of reptiles above. The skies would also keep evolving. Pterosaurs, already masters of the air, might have produced descendants with adaptations we can barely guess at. Some could have evolved into long-distance flyers, migrating across continents with the seasons, their wings stretching wider than any modern bird. Others might have developed beaks for cracking shells, or talons strong enough to lift small dinosaurs from the ground. Birds, though still part of the picture, would share their aerial world with these giants, forever shaped by competition. Perhaps the most striking possibility is that flight itself would have expanded into new forms. Gliders with feathered membranes, hybrids of bird and reptile, might have filled the skies with colors and calls we cannot imagine. The potential for intelligence lingers as one of the most compelling questions. Intelligence does not evolve overnight, nor does it follow a single recipe. It grows where it is useful. For raptors, working together might have demanded sharper communication. For hadrosaurs, living in vast herds might have led to more sophisticated social bonds. For predators like Troodon, already with relatively large brains, problem-solving might have tipped the balance between survival and starvation. Over millions of years, these pressures could have built something remarkable. But intelligence need not look like ours. We measure it through tools, language, and technology, yet animals around us reveal different kinds of brilliance. Octopuses solve puzzles with arms and taste the world through touch. Dolphins communicate with whistles, teaching one another hunting tricks. Crows bend twigs into hooks to reach food. None of these creatures build cities, yet all show sparks of creativity, memory, and planning. Dinosaurs too could have developed such sparks in ways unfamiliar to us. Their intelligence might have been expressed not through fire or machines, but through song, color, or cooperation. Perhaps they would have developed rituals around water holes, patterns of calls that carried knowledge through generations, or migrations guided not just by instinct, but by memory. It is tempting to imagine what might have been if a lineage of intelligent dinosaurs had truly flourished, societies based not on written words, but on displays of feathers or colors. Communities organized through sound, where calls in the night carried meaning across valleys. Problem solving not in laboratories or workshops, but in coordinated hunts or strategies to outwit prey. Such intelligence might never build skyscrapers, yet it would shape their world every bit as profoundly as ours shapes ours. Even without such leaps, evolution would still weave wonders. Think of the forms never seen in our history. Desert-dwelling ceratopsians with sails on their backs to release heat, polar hadrosaurs with downy coats of feathers, sauropods that adapted to wetlands, their nostrils high on their heads like snorkels. Each adaptation a quiet solution to the challenges of living. Each one a reminder that nature never stops experimenting. Over time, Earth itself would look different because of them. Grasslands, which expanded after the dinosaurs vanished, might have developed more slowly or in entirely new ways. Forests would remain under the constant trimming of herds, rivers carved by their migrations. Even the balance of gases in the air could shift. Large herbivores release methane, a greenhouse gas. And with herds of sauropods still wandering the globe, the climate might have leaned warmer for longer. The very air would carry the echo of their survival. As you let these images form, notice how this alternate Earth is not just about giant predators or colossal herbivores. It is about continuity, the endless unfolding of life without interruption. The asteroid was a punctuation mark in our history, a break that let mammals rise. In this version of time, there is no break, only the steady rhythm of evolution, carrying dinosaurs forward, reshaping them again and again into forms both strange and beautiful. The story flows naturally into what comes next. If dinosaurs had continued to evolve, it is not only their world that would change, but ours as well, or rather, the world that would never include us. Mammals, kept small and hidden, would not have spread into the open. Whales, elephants, and humans might never appear. To understand that part of the story, we must look at the mammals that never came. When we think of life today, it is almost impossible to imagine it without mammals. They are everywhere. Lions on the savanna, dolphins in the sea, bats in the night sky. They give us familiar shapes, warm-blooded bodies covered in fur, complex behaviors we often recognize in ourselves. But in the alternate Earth where dinosaurs never fell, this entire branch of life would have remained small, hidden in the shadows. The grand variety we take for granted would never have arrived. To understand what would be missing, we need to remind ourselves of what mammals are. A mammal is not just a creature with fur. Mammals share a set of traits. They are warm-blooded, they feed their young with milk, they usually have larger brains relative to their bodies, and they adapt in remarkably flexible ways. These traits allowed them to take on nearly every role in ecosystems once the dinosaurs were gone. Without that chance, their story would be frozen in its early chapters. In our reality, mammals exploded into diversity after the extinction. Small insect eaters grew into bats that claimed the skies, whales that claimed the seas, elephants that reshaped landscapes, and primates that eventually looked up at the stars. Without the extinction, none of these transformations could have unfolded. The forests would hold no monkeys swinging through branches, no tigers padding silently through the undergrowth. The oceans would have no whales singing across vast distances, no dolphins leaping in arcs of silver spray. The plains would lack the thunder of bison, the grace of antelope, the quiet majesty of elephants. What would remain instead are the small nocturnal mammals of the late Cretaceous, shrew-like creatures scurrying under leaves, perhaps nibbling on insects or seeds, always watchful for predators. They would survive, but they would not rise. The niches of grazers, hunters, and giants would still belong to dinosaurs. Mammals would remain background players, rarely stepping into the light. Think of elephants for a moment. In our world, they are landscape engineers. They knock down trees, carve pathways, and create clearings that allow other species to thrive. In the dinosaur world, elephants would never exist. Instead, herds of sauropods or ceratopsians would continue shaping the land. Their weight and appetites would open forests and guide rivers, leaving no space for elephants to ever evolve. Or take whales. They are the largest animals ever to live, their presence shaping entire ocean ecosystems. When whales dive and resurface, they cycle nutrients from the deep to the surface, feeding plankton that form the base of the food web. In the alternate Earth, oceans would belong to mosasaurs and other marine reptiles. The whale's role as a gentle giant stirring life into the seas would never appear. Instead, the rhythm of marine ecosystems would be driven by reptilian predators, their hunger maintaining balance in more violent ways. Even familiar companions would vanish. There would be no cats, no dogs, no horses. These animals, so deeply woven into human history, are products of mammalian success. Cats evolved as hunters of small prey. Dogs descended from wolves, social predators that thrived by cooperating. Horses became the engines of human civilization, carrying us across continents. Without mammals rising, none of this unfolds. The world would lack not only their presence in the wild, but their eventual bond with humans, if humans ever appeared at all. And then there is us. Humanity is a mammal story, born from primates who learned to walk upright, to use tools, to speak. Without the asteroid, primates might never evolve beyond tiny tree-dwelling creatures. No villages, no cities, no languages, no art. The Earth might remain a planet where intelligence is expressed in different ways, through the songs of hadrosaurs, the strategies of raptors, but not through us. The very idea of human culture would be erased before it ever began. This absence is not just about individual species. It is about the roles mammals play in ecosystems. Grazers like antelope and bison maintain grasslands by keeping plants in check. Predators like lions and wolves keep herbivores from overrunning the land. Scavengers like hyenas recycle what is left behind. Take all of these away and the balance changes. Dinosaurs would continue these roles, but in ways that might look alien to us. A Triceratops herd may keep plains open. A pack of feathered predators may control smaller grazers, but the textures of the ecosystem would be different, guided by reptilian bodies rather than mammalian ones. It is worth pausing to see how this changes the atmosphere of Earth itself. Mammals are warm-blooded, and their constant activity burns energy, producing heat and gases that flow into the environment. Dinosaurs, too, were likely warm-blooded, or partly so, but their biology was different. Their scale of movement, their digestion, even their breathing systems would have left subtle differences in how energy and carbon moved through ecosystems. Over millions of years, these differences could accumulate, producing a climate just slightly different from the one we know. When you picture the absence of mammals, it is not just the loss of familiar faces, it is the loss of entire ways of life. There would be no migrations of wildebeest across the Serengeti, no breaching whales, no monkeys leaping from tree to tree. The night would not carry the song of wolves. The day would not echo with the trumpeting of elephants. These sounds, these movements, would be replaced by the rhythms of dinosaurs. A valley might thunder not with bison, but with herds of hadrosaurs. A horizon might not hold giraffes, but long-necked sauropods stretching toward the treetops. And yet, in their absence, something else flourishes. The dinosaurs unchallenged fill every role. The stage is theirs. Mammals, meanwhile, remain tucked into the margins, their story cut short, their potential locked away. The world continues, but the version of life we know, the one we find so familiar, never arrives. If mammals had remained small and hidden, the arc of life would not only feel different to us, it would sound and look different in every corner of the Earth. Consider the grasslands. In our world, vast plains developed in partnership with grazing mammals. Hooves, teeth, and migration patterns all shaped the way grasses grew and spread. Without mammals, grasses might never have become so dominant. The landscapes we know as savannas or prairies may have looked more like fern-filled floodplains, dotted with cycads and conifers, trimmed not by antelope or buffalo but by herds of hadrosaurs and ceratopians. The rhythm of seasons would still carry migrations, but not the kind we are used to. Instead of caribou moving north each summer, you might see waves of Triceratops crossing valleys, their horns gleaming in the sun. Instead of wildebeest churning rivers with their hooves, duck-billed dinosaurs would splash through shallows, their calls echoing like low brass instruments across the plains. The pattern remains: migration, feeding, birth, and death. But the players are entirely different. The absence of mammals also changes the way predators work. In our world, packs of wolves bring down elk, lions bring down zebras, and orcas chase seals through icy seas. In the alternate Earth, predators would still keep balance, but they would be scaled and feathered. Raptors working together might stalk the edges of hadrosaur herds. Giant tyrannosaurs or their evolved descendants could still wait in forests, striking with bone-crushing jaws. The elegance of feline hunters or the cooperative strategies of dolphins would never exist, replaced instead by reptilian tactics, swift ambushes, piercing claws, or long patience. Some of the most remarkable absences would be in the oceans. Whales are not only giants, they are also caretakers of the sea. Their feeding and diving cycles circulate nutrients. Their very bodies, when they die and sink, create entire ecosystems on the seafloor. Without them, marine life would be arranged differently. Coral reefs would still glow with color. Fish would still dart through currents, but the shadows above would belong to mosasaurs and giant marine reptiles, not the graceful arcs of whales. The soundscape would be transformed too. No hunting whale songs traveling across thousands of miles, no dolphin chatter echoing through bays. Instead, the deep ocean would be marked by silence, broken only by the rush of water and the hunts of reptilian predators. Think, too, of the sky. Bats, the only flying mammals, are vital to many ecosystems. They pollinate flowers, spread seeds, and control insect populations. In their absence, these roles would be left to other creatures. Insects themselves would flourish in ways they never have, perhaps changing plant life dramatically. Birds, sharing the skies with pterosaurs, might have adapted differently, taking over the night skies in place of bats. But the flutter of leathery wings at dusk, the delicate role of bats in shaping ecosystems, would be gone. When we strip mammals from the picture, we also lose the quiet bonds between humans and animals that have shaped culture. No dogs trotting beside campfires, no cats curling on laps, no horses carrying us into battle or across continents. Domestication is a uniquely mammal-driven partnership. Without it, even if humans somehow appeared, their path would feel lonelier, more limited. The richness of human culture, from cave paintings of bison to the stories of whales guiding sailors, would never have existed. These connections vanish before they can ever be formed. It is easy to take mammals for granted because we live in their age, but their story is one of resilience and opportunity. They thrived only because space was made for them. Remove the asteroid, and the stage remains filled with dinosaurs, leaving mammals in the wings, waiting for a cue that never comes. Life still flourishes, but the diversity of shapes, behaviors, and bonds that mammals bring never unfolds. And yet, this alternate Earth is not lacking in wonder. The spaces mammals would have filled are not empty. They are claimed by creatures that followed their own paths. Where we see elephants shaping savannas, sauropods might continue to thunder across plains. Where we hear whales singing, marine reptiles might fill the oceans with their silent power. Where we find intelligence in apes and humans, some dinosaur lineage might grow in its own direction, building social systems and communication unlike anything we know. This is the heart of the speculation. Not that life would stop, but that it would follow an entirely different melody. One where mammals never wrote their verses and dinosaurs kept composing. The world would still have its beauty, its balance, its endless experimentation, but it would not include the creatures we know so intimately. Letting this idea settle, you can sense both loss and awe. Loss in the absence of mammals who gave us companionship, culture, and ourselves. Awe, in realizing how much chance shaped the outcome. With one asteroid, the course of life tilted, opening the way for warm-blooded fur-bearers to rise. Without it, the world hums with reptilian life, its history stretching in another direction. And from here, the thought naturally shifts. What if, against all odds, humans still appeared in such a world? How would our story unfold if we had to share it, not with dogs and cats, but with dinosaurs? Life alongside dinosaurs would shape not only survival, but also the very structure of human communities. Villages, towns, and eventually cities would need to be designed with giants in mind. Defensive walls might rise not just against rival people, but against herds of horned dinosaurs wandering too close. Streets could be wide enough to allow the passage of domesticated reptiles, while storage buildings would be built high off the ground to protect food from scavengers drawn by the scent. The rhythm of urban life would be tuned to the presence of creatures that could weigh as much as a dozen elephants. Trade, too, would take on a different character. In our history, camels carried goods across deserts, and horses drew carts across grasslands. In a dinosaur world, smaller, trainable herbivores could take their place. Long caravans might move across valleys, accompanied by crested hadrosaurs fitted with saddles or packs. In coastal towns, fishing communities could rely on smaller dinosaurs to help corral schools of fish toward nets, much as some cultures today still fish alongside dolphins. These partnerships would turn dinosaurs into essential partners in human survival, woven into daily life as much as livestock is for us. The danger of predators would remain a constant shadow. No matter how advanced humans became, there would always be the question of safety from the largest hunters. Walls might protect fields and homes, but a determined predator like a massive theropod could still wreak havoc. Societies might develop rituals of vigilance, guards posted at night, bells or horns used to signal the approach of danger, fires kept burning along the outskirts of settlements. Over generations, such practices could become ingrained, not just as practical habits, but as cultural traditions. Over time, familiarity would soften fear. People would learn the seasonal routes of herds, the habits of predators, the signs of nesting colonies. Knowledge of dinosaurs would become as deep and intimate as our knowledge of cattle or weather. Entire professions could emerge around it. Herders of small ceratopsians, trainers of agile pack runners, builders of barriers against giants. In this way, coexistence would transform from a daily struggle into a system of cooperation, born of necessity and sharpened by generations of experience. The presence of dinosaurs would also shape warfare. Human conflict has always borrowed strength from animals, whether through cavalry charges, war elephants, or trained birds of prey. In a world filled with dinosaurs, the potential for military use would be immense. Swift bipedal dinosaurs could carry riders into battle, striking fear into opponents with their speed and ferocity. Heavier herbivores, armored with natural horns and frills, might serve as living battering rams against fortifications. The symbolism alone, charging into war atop a reptilian giant, would leave a mark on myth and memory alike. But war is only one facet of culture. Just as important would be the stories people told. Myths might center on titanic battles between humans and predators, or on benevolent dinosaurs seen as protectors of crops and families. Festivals could coincide with the return of migratory herds. Celebrations filled with songs imitating the calls of hadrosaurs, or dances that mimic the sweeping movements of sauropods. Art carved into stone might depict not lions or eagles, but winged reptiles soaring across the sky. Every human expression of wonder, fear, and hope would be colored by the presence of these creatures. Agriculture itself would carry the imprint of dinosaur life. Fields could not be planted in open valleys without risk of trampling, so terraces on hillsides or raised platforms might become common. Water management would be vital, not just to irrigate crops, but to protect them from thirsty herds seeking to drink. Farmers could even use the habits of dinosaurs to their advantage, timing planting seasons to avoid the movement of nearby grazers. In this way, human ingenuity would adapt not in spite of dinosaurs, but in response to them. The bond between humans and dinosaurs might deepen in subtle ways. Just as people today form attachments to animals, dogs, cats, even working oxen, early farmers and herders might have felt the same toward their reptilian companions. A child growing up alongside a small domesticated species could see it not only as a tool, but as part of the household. Such relationships, repeated across generations, could create a sense of kinship, reshaping how humans thought of their place in nature. Religious thought might have taken new forms as well. Temples could be decorated with carvings of sauropods seen as sacred, or with horns and frills collected from fallen dinosaurs. Priests might interpret the movements of herds as signs from the divine, linking the rhythms of reptilian life with the fate of human communities. Just as ancient cultures revered bulls, eagles, or crocodiles, this world would revere Triceratops, raptors, and pterosaurs. The line between myth and ecology would blur, with dinosaurs both feared and worshipped. As technology advanced, the relationship would grow even more complex. Harnessing dinosaurs for work would require careful breeding, training, and eventually tools designed specifically for them. Harnesses, saddles, wagons, and even architecture would change to accommodate their size and strength. A city might boast not only stables for horses, but massive enclosures for domesticated herds, their presence shaping the economy and the skyline alike. Still, no matter how much humans learn to live with dinosaurs, the unpredictability of nature would remain. A sudden stampede could level a village. A predator venturing too close could undo months of careful preparation. Humans would never be entirely in control. They would be partners at best, fragile creatures negotiating their survival in a world still dominated by giants. From this perspective, the story of coexistence is not one of dominance, but of balance. Humans would rise not as rulers of the planet, but as one species among many, their ingenuity tempered by the overwhelming scale of reptilian life. Such a world would challenge every step, every choice, every belief, forcing humans to adapt constantly. And from that foundation, we can begin to explore not just survival, but the shape of daily life, the rhythms of farming, travel, and culture in a world where dinosaurs still walk beside us. Morning in a dinosaur world would not begin with roosters crowing, but with the deep, resonant calls of hadrosaurs echoing across valleys. People waking in small villages might hear the distant trumpeting of a Triceratops herd moving toward a river, or the rhythmic wing beats of pterosaurs gliding overhead. Life's routine would unfold to the soundtrack of giants. Farming, one of humanity's oldest practices, would be shaped entirely by the need to live alongside these creatures. Fields might not stretch in wide open plains, for the risk of trampling would be constant. Instead, crops could be planted on raised terraces or within fenced enclosures built from stone and timber, strong enough to resist the weight of wandering herbivores. Farmers would learn to watch herd movements closely, planting seeds only after migrations passed, or timing harvests before large grazers swept through. Just as ancient people once studied the stars to predict seasons, these farmers would study dinosaurs, learning to read their rhythms as part of the calendar. Food itself would be different. Without cows, pigs, or sheep, diets would rely on alternatives. Domesticated dinosaurs, smaller, bird-like herbivores, might provide meat and eggs. Communities could raise them much as chickens are raised today, gathering eggs each morning and using their feathers for warmth or decoration. For larger feasts or ceremonies, hunters might bring down a single mid-sized dinosaur, the meat shared across the village in celebrations that reinforced bonds. Every meal would carry the influence of reptilian life, with stories of the hunt or the harvest tied directly to the creatures around them. Travel too would feel different. Instead of horses, people might rely on agile, two-legged dinosaurs fitted with saddles or harnesses. Caravans moving along trade routes could stretch for miles, the sound of claws clicking on stone roads. Paths through forests would be wide and reinforced, not only for human movement but to allow for herds of domesticated companions. For water travel, boats might still be common, but river journeys would demand constant vigilance against the shadows of marine reptiles lurking beneath. Travel stories told by traders would not only speak of distant lands, but of encounters with predators or the sight of winged giants drifting in the skies above. Daily labor would also adapt. Fields would need not only tending, but guarding. with watchtowers keeping an eye on both predators and grazing herds. Children might grow up learning not only how to plant or harvest, but how to recognize the warning signs of approaching danger, the rustling of trees before a herd emerges, the sudden silence of birds before a predator appears. Entire crafts could grow around the needs of this world: saddle makers for riding dinosaurs, builders specializing in reinforced homes, musicians crafting instruments that mimic the deep calls of hadrosaurs to soothe herds or signal across distances. Religious life would be inseparable from these creatures. Rituals could honor the return of migrating herds or seek protection from predators. Temples might rise near nesting grounds, with offerings placed to ensure safe coexistence. Festivals could coincide with great events in the natural world: the hatching of a colony of feathered dinosaurs or the soaring of pterosaurs across seasonal winds. Stories told in the quiet of night would weave dinosaurs into every myth, casting them as gods, protectors, or challenges set by fate. Just as ancient cultures carved bulls or lions into stone, this world would carve the likeness of dinosaurs into monuments and jewelry, their forms a constant reminder of the balance between survival and reverence. Education would reflect the environment as well. Children would not only learn language or craft, but also the habits of nearby dinosaurs. They would memorize which herds were safe to approach and which valleys to avoid in migration season. Songs and stories might serve as lessons, passing down knowledge of survival through memory and rhythm. When the hills are silent, the hunters walk, an elder might say, teaching the young to notice patterns in nature that could mean danger. Knowledge would not only be practical, but sacred, woven into the cultural fabric as wisdom inherited from ancestors. Even leisure would be different. In the evenings, people might gather to listen to the distant calls of herds, turning them into music or poetry. Hunters returning from expeditions could share stories of near escapes from predators, their words carrying the awe of standing so close to something immense. Children might play games imitating the movements of dinosaurs, running in circles like herds or pretending to soar like pterosaurs. Entertainment, much like survival, would always circle back to the creatures that filled their skies and valleys. The daily rhythm of life, then, would be one of constant adjustment. Every human activity, from farming to feasting, from building to storytelling, would bend toward the reality of living with dinosaurs. Danger would never disappear, but it would become part of the expected pattern, a backdrop against which resilience and creativity flourished. People would not speak of dinosaurs as something extraordinary. They would speak of them as neighbors, companions, and obstacles, as ordinary to them as cows or horses are to us. This constant presence would shape human identity itself. Just as our history is filled with symbols of lions, eagles, and wolves, their history would be filled with images of horned, feathered, or winged giants. To live in a dinosaur world would mean not only surviving with them, but defining oneself through them. And from here, it is natural to wonder how culture itself, the way people create meaning and community, would continue to evolve under the shadow of such giants. In towns and villages where humans and dinosaurs share the same horizon, architecture would reflect constant adaptation. Homes could be built with high, slanted roofs to deter flying reptiles from perching above. Storage silos might stand on stone platforms, raised from the ground not just to protect grain from rain, but to keep it out of reach of curious, bird-like dinosaurs eager to steal food. Streets would be wide, lined with sturdy fences, because even a single wandering herbivore could crush walls with its weight. Safety would be a principle built into every brick and beam. Markets would be lively places where the sounds of human barter mingled with the calls of nearby herds. Stalls might sell feathers collected from molting dinosaurs, their colors used for clothing or ceremonial wear. Thorns and bones could be carved into tools, ornaments, or musical instruments. Alongside baskets of grain and fruit, people might exchange eggs of domesticated species, prized both as food and as currency. Trade would not just move goods, but knowledge. Tales of distant lands where different dinosaur herds roamed, where pterosaurs gathered in swarms so dense they darkened the skies, where rivers carried the bones of giants long gone. Community life would revolve around the cycles of the animals around them. Festivals might celebrate the safe passage of migrating herds, with dances imitating the sweeping tails or crests of dinosaurs. Children could wear masks shaped like horned faces or feathered snouts, learning through play to respect the creatures that gave rhythm to their survival. Religious ceremonies might include offerings of crops or crafted items to nearby nesting grounds. Gestures meant not to tame, but to honor the giants that shaped their world. The presence of dinosaurs would also reshape medicine and healing. Just as ancient people once studied plants and animals for cures, these societies might learn to use parts of dinosaurs for remedies. The powdered bone of certain species could be believed to strengthen the body. Feathers might be boiled into tonics, and oils from reptiles might be used in rituals of protection. Whether these treatments worked or not, they would form part of the spiritual and medical traditions, blurring the line between science and belief. Nightfall would bring its own challenges and rituals. Fires would be lit not only for warmth, but as barriers against predators. Songs and chants might echo through villages to signal strength and unity, discouraging curious hunters from approaching. Families would gather close, telling stories of the creatures they feared and revered, embedding lessons of survival into myth. In these quiet hours, human culture would grow, built around the ever-present awareness of what moved beyond the flicker of the flames. Travel between communities would be an adventure of its own. Caravans might depart at dawn, guarded by riders on swift dinosaurs trained to detect danger. Rest stops along the way could be reinforced with high walls, built on rocky outcrops where herds could not easily pass. Travelers would measure distance not in miles, but in the time it took to cross valleys where certain dinosaurs gathered. 2 Triceratops migrations away might be a phrase as familiar as 2 days' journey in our world. Encounters with predators would leave marks on memory and story, told and retold as warnings for future generations. The arts would be infused with reptilian influence. Music could draw inspiration from the deep, resonant calls of hadrosaurs or the high-pitched cries of pterosaurs. Drums might be built from hides, flutes from hollow bones. Painters and sculptors would capture the forms of giants on cave walls and stone tablets, their colors drawn from natural pigments. Poetry and song would not describe lions or deer, but the sweep of wings across the sunset, or the trembling of the ground as a herd thundered past. Culture itself would be shaped by the constant reminder that humans were never alone in their world. Even language would carry their presence. Words for danger, shelter, or movement might be tied directly to dinosaur behavior. Dialects could develop based on local species. A coastal community might have dozens of words for pterosaurs, while inland farmers might have a vocabulary rich with terms for horn crests or frills. The rhythm of speech itself might mirror the sounds of the world around it, echoing the deep calls and resonant beats of reptilian life. Over time, these daily adaptations would not feel extraordinary to the people living them. Just as we think little of traffic lights or the sound of birdsong, they would accept the calls of herds and the thunder of footsteps as background noise. The extraordinary would become ordinary. Children would fall asleep to the sound of giant bodies moving in the distance, comforted rather than frightened, because it was the world they knew. From a modern perspective, this version of daily life feels alien, filled with dangers and wonders we can barely imagine. But for the people living it, it would be normal, the only world they had ever known. Their sense of community, their rituals, their art, and their survival would all be woven into a tapestry threaded with scales, feathers, and bone. And as life carried forward, these patterns would shape not only culture, but the path of human progress itself, guiding how technology, cities, and civilizations would evolve in the shadow of giants. The texture of daily life would be seen most clearly in the materials people used. In our history, leather and wool shaped clothing, while wood and metal built tools. In a dinosaur world, feathers, scales, and bones would take their place. Clothing might be sewn from woven plant fibers, decorated with the brilliant feathers shed during seasonal molts. Jewelry could be carved from teeth and claws, each piece carrying both beauty and a quiet reminder of the dangers that lurked beyond the village. Walls of homes might be reinforced with bones of fallen giants, not wasted, but turned into pillars of strength. Nothing from a dinosaur would be ignored. Everything had meaning, everything had use. Food culture would also be transformed. Cooking fires would bring together flavors both familiar and strange. Grains and fruits would still be staples, but meat would come from small domesticated dinosaurs, their eggs forming the base of countless dishes. Communities might learn special methods for preserving meat, smoking it in clay ovens to guard against the times when herds drove prey away. Spices could be valued not only for flavor but for their ability to mask the scent of food, keeping predators from approaching. Kitchens would be both places of nourishment and bastions of defense, shaping cuisine into a careful balance between survival and celebration. Seasons would not only mark weather but dictate the rhythm of life. Spring might bring the arrival of migratory herds, their presence celebrated in festivals as they passed through valleys. Summer could be dangerous, with predators hunting more frequently as rivers dried. Autumn might bring safety, as some dinosaurs retreated to distant feeding grounds, leaving farmland less threatened. Winter in colder climates could mean long nights filled with the eerie calls of feathered dinosaurs adapted to snow. Each season would not simply be a change in temperature, but a reshuffling of neighbors, some benign, others deadly. For children, growing up in such a world would mean lessons far removed from our playground games. From an early age, they would be taught to read footprints in the mud, to listen for the subtle shift in wind that carried the scent of herds, to climb quickly if danger approached. Play might mimic these lessons. Games of hide-and-seek, where one child played the role of a raptor, others learning to escape quietly. Songs could double as warnings, teaching the youngest to recognize calls and cries from the wild. Childhood would still hold joy, but every game would be laced with lessons, every story woven with survival. At night, when the fires burned low, the presence of dinosaurs would enter human minds in quieter, deeper ways. The knowledge that beyond the safety of walls and flame-walked predators too large to fight would shape human psychology. Thea might grow into ritual, chants spoken before sleep, charms hung above doorways, elders telling stories to remind families that they were not powerless, that they shared the world rather than being crushed by it. Over generations, this constant awareness would etch itself into belief systems. Humanity's dreams, both literal and cultural, would be filled with the shadows of giants. Art would become both expression and education. The walls of gathering places could be painted with vivid scenes, herds moving across plains, winged reptiles circling the sun, hunters confronting predators. Theater might emerge in the form of dances, with performers wearing masks shaped like crests and frills, retelling great hunts or migrations. Music would carry echoes of the natural world, drums resonating like the distant steps of sauropods, flutes imitating the calls of hadrosaurs. Art would not only preserve memory but help people live alongside the creatures they feared and admired. Mythology would evolve to explain the mysteries of dinosaur life. Why did herds vanish into the horizon each year? Why did certain predators hunt only under a full moon? Why did the earth sometimes tremble under their passing? Myths could offer answers where observation faltered. A god of thunder might be imagined not with a hammer, but as a colossal dinosaur whose footsteps shook the ground. A sky deity could be seen in the wings of a pterosaur, its glide across the heavens interpreted as a message to mortals. Belief would become a way of negotiating the unknown, giving meaning to the overwhelming scale of life around them. Communication between communities would also take unique forms. Villages might be separated not just by rivers or forests, but by herds that blocked travel for weeks at a time. Signal fires could be lit from mountaintops to announce safe passages, while horns carved from dinosaur bone might carry warnings across valleys. Diplomacy would require patience. Visiting a neighbor might mean waiting until migrations ended or predators moved on. Still, trade would flourish, because what one community lacked, another might provide: feathers, horns, grains, crafted tools. The flow of goods would be matched by the flow of stories, stitching together a network of human resilience. The unpredictability of life with dinosaurs would make resilience a central virtue. Families would store food against lean times, villages would maintain communal shelters strong enough to resist stampedes, and every adult would carry knowledge of both farming and defense. cooperation would not be optional but essential. Where danger is constant, bonds grow deep. Neighbors would rely on one another not just for friendship, but for survival, each member of the community a part of a larger shield against the unpredictability of the world. And yet daily life, for all its dangers, would also be filled with moments of quiet beauty. A farmer pausing from work to watch a herd silhouetted against the horizon. Children laughing as domesticated dinosaurs splashed in shallow rivers. Lovers walking by moonlight under the shadows of winged reptiles gliding silently above. These ordinary moments would be just as real as the fears, giving people reason to endure, to hope, to build. Life, even under the weight of giants, would be lived not only in caution, but in wonder. This balance between fear and beauty, ritual and routine, would define humanity in a dinosaur world. Every action, from sowing seeds to telling stories, would be threaded with the presence of creatures far larger and older than us. And from this foundation, human civilization would rise, not in isolation, but in constant dialogue with the giants that walked beside them. It is here that the story turns toward progress itself, toward the tools, cities, and inventions that might emerge in a world where every step forward is taken in the company of dinosaurs. Civilization is more than survival. It is the story of how people build beyond their immediate needs, creating tools, cities, and systems that endure across generations. In a world where dinosaurs remained part of the living landscape, the shape of civilization would bend in extraordinary ways. The same human impulse to invent and organize would still exist, but every step forward would be guided by the presence of giants. Take transport, one of the pillars of progress. In our history, the wheel and domesticated animals like oxen and horses transformed how people moved goods and traveled. In a dinosaur world, the animals harnessed for transport would look very different. Medium-sized herbivores, with sturdy builds and calm temperaments, might become the equivalents of oxen, drawing carts across rough terrain. Their strength would surpass most mammals, allowing humans to move heavier loads, build larger settlements, and trade over greater distances. Long caravans could stretch across landscapes, the sound of claws striking packed earth, marking the rhythm of commerce. Water travel would also adapt. Rivers and seas would still serve as highways of connection, but the threats beneath the surface would shape ship design. Boats might be reinforced with thicker hulls, crafted to withstand attacks from marine reptiles. Coastal trade routes could include guarded convoys, with watchtowers built along cliffs to track the movements of predators. Just as whaling once drove the economies of entire nations, hunting or warding off sea reptiles might become a specialized industry, tied to the survival of maritime trade. The rise of cities would bring its own transformations. Urban design would be dictated not only by human needs, but by the necessity of protection. Defensive walls would rise taller and stronger, not against invading armies alone, but against wandering herds. Streets could be wide and reinforced, built to withstand the passage of domesticated dinosaurs carrying goods. Storage centers might stand on elevated stone platforms, protecting food from both weather and scavengers. City planners would need to consider migration routes and predator ranges as carefully as water supply or farmland. Architecture would reflect these challenges. Imagine marketplaces with roofs supported by columns carved from fossilized bones, or temples decorated with horns and frills collected over centuries. Homes might be built with layered stone walls thick enough to resist accidental collisions from grazing creatures. Entire neighborhoods could be arranged around safe enclosures for domesticated species, blending human and reptilian life into the very core of urban identity. The skyline of such cities would not only be defined by spires and towers, but by the movements of great animals walking the avenues below. Industry, too, would take on a different character. In our world, the Industrial Revolution was powered by coal, steam, and later oil. In a dinosaur world, the availability of massive labor from domesticated reptiles could delay or reshape the path of mechanization. Why invent machines to pull enormous weights if trained creatures could already perform the task? Workshops might focus on crafting harnesses, protective gear, and specialized tools for handling animals rather than building early engines. When machines did arrive, They might be designed not to replace dinosaurs entirely, but to work alongside them. Hybrid systems, where muscle and machine shared the burden of progress. Energy sources would still be sought, but their uses might be guided by necessity. Steam engines could be used for long-distance transport where no animal could endure, or in dangerous regions where predators threaten caravans. Factories might arise near rivers, powered by water wheels, but the products created would still revolve around managing life with dinosaurs. Reinforced carts, protective armor for workers, weapons capable of defending against predators. The very shape of industry would be molded by the giants that walked outside its doors. Warfare would also evolve under this influence. In our history, animals have been part of battle, horses carrying cavalry, elephants breaking enemy lines. In a dinosaur world, the possibilities would be far greater. Armies might field units of armored ceratopsians, their horns fitted with metal tips to increase their lethality. Swift, two-legged dinosaurs could serve as living cavalry, carrying riders into battle at speeds unmatched by any horse. Even flying reptiles might be used, not as mounts, but as scouts, trained to circle above and give warning of enemy movement. The battlefield would be reshaped by the presence of these creatures, strategies revolving around how to counter or protect against reptilian power. Weapons and fortifications would grow in response. Cities might build walls not only to keep human armies at bay, but to repel trained dinosaurs crashing through gates. Siege weapons could evolve specifically to wound or drive off giant reptiles. Metalworking would advance rapidly, because defending against a creature the size of a house demands stronger materials and sharper tools. Entire industries might arise around breeding, training, and outfitting dinosaurs for war, turning them into both assets and symbols of power. Religion and politics would mirror these changes. Rulers might claim divine right through their mastery of particular species, parading domesticated dinosaurs as proof of their authority. Dynasties could be remembered not only for monuments, but for the great beasts they controlled. Wars might be remembered as much for the creatures involved as for the human leaders who fought them. A king who led an army of horned dinosaurs would be etched into memory as surely as one who raised a palace. The bond between human power and reptilian strength would be inseparable. Technology, then, would not be a simple replacement for animals but a constant negotiation. Human ingenuity would always look for ways to extend reach and reduce risk, but the presence of dinosaurs would alter priorities. Machines for farming might arrive later, delayed by the usefulness of domesticated species. Weapons capable of piercing thick hide might drive metallurgy further, faster. Urban planning would leap ahead, forced by the need to build spaces that could withstand giants. Progress would still march forward, but its rhythm would echo the footsteps of reptiles, not hooves or wheels. From this foundation, the next step in the story emerges naturally. What would a truly modern world look like if built alongside dinosaurs? How would skyscrapers, railways, and even global travel transform when shaped by the presence of living fossils that never disappeared? By the time civilization reached what we would recognize as the modern era, the imprint of dinosaurs would be everywhere. Skylines would still rise, but their forms would reflect the need to live with creatures far larger than trucks or trains. Streets in global cities might be designed like boulevards, not for cars alone, but wide enough to accommodate domesticated herds. Bridges would be reinforced, carrying the weight of reptilian caravans alongside human vehicles. Parks could double as grazing grounds, where smaller species lived under careful management, turning public spaces into a blend of nature reserve and city square. Skyscrapers themselves would be built with caution. Ground floors might be armored with stone or metal, capable of resisting accidental impacts from passing giants. Rooftop gardens could be designed not just for aesthetics, but as observation platforms where citizens kept track of migratory patterns beyond the city. The pulse of urban life would never be separated from the environment around it. Even in the heart of a metropolis, people would live with the sound of distant calls carried in on the wind. Transport in such a world would evolve along two tracks. On one hand, modern railways and highways would still emerge, powered by engines too fast and efficient to match with animal labor. On the other hand, domesticated dinosaurs would not vanish. Instead, they might be integrated into systems as living complements to machines. In agricultural regions, herds could still be used to plow fields or haul heavy equipment, reducing the need for fuel in rural economies. In cities, trained dinosaurs might serve ceremonial roles, pulling great wagons during parades or symbolizing cultural pride. Technology would not erase them, but fold them into the fabric of progress. Air travel would add another layer of complexity. With winged reptiles still present, skies would not be empty. Airports might be built with wide protective domes over runways, ensuring aircraft avoided dangerous collisions. Air traffic control would not only track planes but migrating flocks of pterosaurs. Pilots would be trained to navigate through skies where living creatures as large as small planes still soared. The marvel of flight in this world would always feel like a shared privilege, a space contested between humans and their ancient neighbors. Industry and energy systems would also carry the mark of reptilian presence. Fossil fuels might still be discovered and exploited, but with unique irony, societies would burn the remnants of prehistoric creatures while living alongside their descendants. Entire debates might emerge about the ethics of extracting ancient remains while preserving living species. Later, as renewable energy became more urgent, dinosaurs might play unexpected roles. Their waste used as fertilizer on industrial scales, their biology studied for enzymes that could improve biofuel production. Progress in chemistry and biology would look at dinosaurs not just as obstacles, but as untapped resources for innovation. Medicine too would change course. Dinosaurs would be studied for their resilience, their immune systems, their adaptations to climates humans struggled with. A species that survived in swamps might inspire treatments for human infections. Feathered reptiles, thriving in Arctic winds, could reveal secrets of cold resistance. The pharmaceutical industry would not only look to plants or mammals, but to the immense library of genetic knowledge preserved in reptilian bodies. Some diseases might even be treated through compounds derived from dinosaurs, their biology reshaping human health in profound ways. War in the industrial and modern eras would take a different face as well. Tanks and planes would still exist, but dinosaurs might serve as mobile platforms for weapons in rough terrains where machines faltered. Armored ceratopsians could carry cannons into jungles where trucks could not go. Sauropods, towering above the battlefield, might be draped in protective plating, their sheer presence altering the psychology of war. Propaganda posters could show not just soldiers but their reptilian allies, symbols of strength and endurance. In turn, enemies would design weapons specifically to disable such creatures, accelerating the development of rocketry, explosives, and precision targeting. The atomic age would bring new anxieties. Nuclear testing in deserts or atolls would raise questions not only about human survival, but about the fate of ancient reptiles exposed to radiation. Would they mutate? Would they endure where humans could not? Cold War fears might include not only bombs, but the possibility of weaponized dinosaurs captured and trained by rival powers. The presence of living fossils would deepen both the terror and fascination of an age already shadowed by existential threats. As the world shifted into the digital era, the role of dinosaurs would move from physical survival to cultural imagination. Documentaries, art, and media would not look back at fossils as curiosities of extinction, but at living species as part of everyday life. A child with a computer in this world might search not for pictures of extinct creatures, but for live feeds of nesting colonies. Social media could buzz with stories of rare sightings, viral images of herds moving across highways, or debates about conservation laws protecting species that were both dangerous and awe-inspiring. The internet would be filled with footage of dinosaurs crossing city streets at night, blending the ancient with the immediate. Conservation itself would be a defining challenge of the modern age. Humans in our world worry about endangered elephants, tigers, and whales. In this alternate reality, entire global efforts might focus on preserving sauropods or preventing the extinction of rare pterosaurs. Zoos would look less like cages and more like sprawling sanctuaries, vast enough to contain creatures that dwarfed buses. Tourism could revolve around witnessing these giants, with safaris not for lions or giraffes, but for hadrosaurs and horned reptiles grazing in preserved valleys. Economics, politics, and ethics would all collide in the question of how to live responsibly with neighbors whose lineage stretched back hundreds of millions of years. Culture in the digital age would also absorb their presence. Films might depict not speculative what-if dinosaurs returned, but dramas and comedies set in worlds where they were always present. Music videos could feature herds moving alongside dancers. Literature would imagine love stories, tragedies, and epics shaped by the shared existence of giants. Just as our culture is saturated with references to cats, dogs, and horses, theirs would overflow with symbols of scales, feathers, and claws. Dinosaurs would not just be animals, they would be cultural pillars, and through all of this, the central theme would remain unchanged. Human ingenuity finding ways to adapt, integrate, and build within a world that was never entirely theirs. Technology would not erase dinosaurs, nor would dinosaurs stop human invention. Instead, the two would intertwine, creating a civilization both familiar and alien, one where every skyscraper, every highway, every network bore the faint echo of footsteps that began long before humanity existed. From here, the story widens beyond cities and machines, into the planet itself, into landscapes and climates reshaped by the survival of giants. When we picture Earth today, we imagine its familiar zones: green forests, rolling grasslands, wide deserts, icy poles. But if dinosaurs had never vanished, these landscapes would be shaped by their immense presence, each region carrying a different rhythm of life. The planet itself would feel heavier, more alive, its environments sculpted by creatures weighing many tons. Jungles would likely be among the most striking. In our world, rainforests are dominated by birds, primates, and insects. In a dinosaur world, the canopy would still drip with vines and echo with bird calls, but below, enormous reptiles would reshape the ground. Herds of hadrosaurs might move through the undergrowth, their sheer numbers opening clearings as they fed on ferns and broad-leafed plants. Trails would form not from human machetes, but from generations of reptilian footsteps, wide avenues of broken foliage that doubled as migration routes. Predators, silent and patient, would haunt the edges of these green corridors, blending into the shadows until the moment they struck. The rainforest floor itself would be sculpted differently. With constant trampling, undergrowth might remain sparse in some regions, replaced by open, muddy tracks where water pooled in the footprints of giants. Insects and amphibians would thrive in these shallow ponds, creating micro-ecosystems dependent on dinosaur movement. Just as elephants today carve paths through forests, creating habitats for countless smaller species, dinosaurs would be ecological engineers, reshaping jungles with every step. Savannas and open plains would be equally transformed. In our world, these grasslands are home to herds of antelope, wildebeest, and elephants. In a dinosaur-filled Earth, herds of Triceratops or other horned dinosaurs might graze in their place, sweeping across the land in vast numbers. The ground would tremble under their combined weight, turning soil, dispersing seeds, and altering vegetation patterns. Trees might adapt by growing taller and tougher, their bark resistant to the constant pressure of horns and teeth. Grasslands themselves might look different, not dominated by grasses as we know them, but by hardy ferns, cycads, and flowering plants evolved to survive relentless grazing. Rivers winding through these plains would be lifelines not only for humans, but for dinosaurs themselves. Herds would gather at the banks, stirring up mud and reshaping shorelines into vast, trampled beaches. Predators would wait nearby, aware that waterholes concentrated prey. Crocodiles, already survivors from deep time, would coexist with larger reptilian hunters, their ambushes adding another layer of danger. For people, settling near rivers would mean living with both opportunity and risk. Fertile soil enriched by dinosaur dung, but constant vulnerability to herds and hunters drawn by water. Deserts in this alternate Earth would carry their own stories. In our world, Camels and hardy shrubs define these spaces. In a world of dinosaurs, reptiles, adapted to dry conditions, could thrive. Perhaps smaller scaled species capable of storing water, or giant sauropods moving in seasonal migrations across arid basins. Their size would allow them to travel long distances between oases, dispersing seeds across deserts and turning some barren regions into shifting mosaics of vegetation. The wind-carved dunes might bear the footprints of herds long after they passed, giant trails written in sand, erased only by the next storm. Mountains and highlands would remain more difficult for dinosaurs to dominate, yet even here they would leave their mark. Smaller, sure-footed species might climb rocky slopes, feeding on sparse vegetation and creating patterns of erosion with their movements. Valleys between mountains could act as natural corridors, concentrating migrations into bottlenecks where predators and humans alike waited. For communities living in high places, life would mean observing these seasonal flows, timing their movements to avoid being caught between herds. The landscape itself would feel alive, its features animated by the rhythms of reptilian life. Forests in temperate zones would also change. Where deer and boar roam in our world, agile dinosaurs with feathers and beaks might fill the same roles. Autumn would bring migrations of bird-like species feeding on fruits, scattering seeds across vast distances. Winters might grow quieter, with only the hardiest reptiles persisting, their feathers insulating them against the cold. Humans in such climates would learn to track not only the turning of leaves, but the comings and goings of dinosaurs, their presence as much a part of seasonal change as frost or rain. The sheer scale of dinosaurs would influence vegetation in profound ways. Trees might evolve to grow thicker bark, resistant to constant gnawing. Some plants could spread toxins or tough fibers to discourage feeding, leading to arms races between flora and fauna. The landscape would reflect this battle. Groves of resistant trees, fields dominated by hardy plants, and clearings where herds had overpowered vegetation. From a distance, the pattern of a forest might not be set by climate alone, but by the feeding routes of the creatures that shaped it. For humans, living in these regions would mean navigating not only the weather, but the living weight of the environment. A farmer in the jungle would plant crops on terraces above the reach of herbivores. A shepherd on the plains might time his movements around dinosaur herds, using their presence to enrich soil while avoiding being trampled. Hunters in deserts could follow the migrations of sauropods, knowing that where they went, life-giving water and vegetation followed. In every landscape, human strategy would be tied to reptilian behavior as tightly as to rainfall or sunlight. Even the sounds of these landscapes would differ. Instead of the roar of lions or the trumpeting of elephants, the world would echo with deep bellows, sharp calls, and the rumbling of herds. The chorus of life would be deeper, heavier, a constant reminder that Earth's ecosystems were not ruled by mammals but by their ancient predecessors. For those living in this world, silence itself might be rare, the absence of calls signaling danger as much as their presence. From lush jungles to open deserts, mountains to forests, Earth's landscapes would be reshaped into living arenas, their forms dictated not only by wind, water, and stone, but by the creatures that strode across them. And yet this is only half the story. Beyond the coasts, beneath the waves, the oceans themselves would carry the mark of giants, their depths reshaped by creatures that never surrendered their dominion. Beyond the coasts, the oceans would hold a world as altered as the land. In our time, whales dominate the seas, their migrations shaping entire ecosystems. In a world where dinosaurs never vanished, it would be marine reptiles that filled those roles. Creatures like mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and ichthyosaurs. They were already rulers of the ancient seas, and without extinction, they might have continued evolving into forms even larger, faster, and more specialized. The surface of the water would never be empty. Schools of fish might leap to escape swift, reptilian hunters, their movements scattering in flashes of silver beneath the waves. Long-necked plesiosaurs could patrol coastlines, their heads darting above the surface like living buoys, while deep-diving ichthyosaurs cut through the ocean with the efficiency of dolphins. Humans living near the shore would see these creatures not as myths from fossils, but as part of daily life, their shapes as familiar as gulls or sharks are to us. Coastlines themselves would be reshaped. Beaches might be nesting grounds for giant reptiles, laying eggs in the sand, their tracks carving enormous patterns across the shore. Fishermen would need to guard against predators capable of overturning boats, and entire traditions could emerge around navigating seas where danger lurked at every depth. Harbors might be fortified with heavy piers, designed not only to resist storms, but to deter attacks from curious or hungry marine reptiles. To live by the sea would be to live with both opportunity and threat, wealth flowing from the water, alongside constant reminders of its dangers. Islands would take on unique roles in this world. Some might become sanctuaries where certain species nested in peace, their isolation protecting them from predators. Others could be battlegrounds of survival, where reptiles from the sea clashed with those from the land. For people, islands might serve as both safe havens and dangerous traps. Their resources abundant, but their isolation vulnerable to the creatures that ruled the surrounding waters. Seafaring would always be more than human ingenuity. It would be a negotiation with ancient forces still very much alive. Farther north and south, the polar regions would not be barren wastelands of ice, but environments adapted for reptilian life. Fossils tell us that dinosaurs once lived near the poles, some species equipped with feathers for insulation, others capable of enduring long months of twilight. If they had survived, these creatures might have evolved into even more specialized forms: stocky, feathered dinosaurs thriving in snowy forests, or semi-aquatic reptiles sliding across frozen seas. The Arctic and Antarctic would not be empty expanses, but living ecosystems filled with hardy giants. For humans, exploration of these regions would carry new challenges. Expeditions might report not only blizzards and frozen seas, but encounters with predators lurking among ice floes. Stories of strange, feathered reptiles moving silently through snow could become the stuff of both science and legend. Settlements in polar zones would need to be fortified against creatures adapted to the same cold, turning survival into a constant test of endurance and vigilance. Where our world tells tales of polar bears and walruses, theirs would tell of horned reptiles trudging through snowdrifts and winged hunters gliding against the gray sky. The climate as a whole would also be shaped by dinosaur survival. Enormous herds moving across continents would stir up soil, disperse seeds, and recycle nutrients at a scale mammals never achieved. The amount of vegetation consumed, trampled, and regrown would alter how carbon moved through the atmosphere. Some regions might become greener, enriched by constant fertilization, while others might wear down into open plains from centuries of grazing. The balance of greenhouse gases could tilt differently, leading to climates that warmed or cooled in unique rhythms. Rain patterns could also be influenced. Herds opening forest clearings would change how moisture cycled, creating new wind currents and shifting storm paths. Migratory routes might link ecosystems thousands of miles apart, carrying nutrients in ways modern Earth never experienced. To live in this world would be to inhabit a planet where climate was not only shaped by oceans and skies, but by the footsteps of giants. Humans, as always, would adapt. Settlements near coasts might specialize in navigating seas filled with reptiles, developing ships as resilient as fortresses. Inland communities would orient themselves around fertile plains enriched by herds, timing planting and harvests to align with migration cycles. Polar explorers would write journals not only about frostbite and hunger, but about strange feathered beings that watched them from the tree line. Climate science itself would grow from studying not just winds and rainfall, but the living giants that shaped both. The psychology of living in such a world would also shift. Where we look at mountains or oceans with awe, they would look at the creatures within them with equal reverence. A storm at sea would not only be feared for waves, but for the possibility of reptilian hunters driven close to shore. A snowstorm in the Arctic would not only mean bitter cold, but the silence before a predator emerged from the white haze. Climate and creatures would be inseparable, fused into a single perception of environment. Art and culture would naturally reflect this bond. Paintings might depict not only landscapes, but the living giants that defined them. Sauropods against a backdrop of savanna, winged reptiles sweeping through stormy skies, armored creatures trudging through snowfields. Songs would tell not just of rain or drought, but of herds whose movements carried the promise of renewal. Literature might frame entire worlds through the lens of coexistence, turning every environment into a stage where humans and dinosaurs shared the spotlight. And as Earth shifted through cycles of ice and warmth, drought and flood, it would never be a planet where humans stood alone at the center. Instead, it would be a planet where landscapes themselves carried the mark of creatures that refused to fade. From jungle to desert, from reef to tundra, Earth would feel less like the world we know and more like a living memory of prehistory. A reminder that climate and creatures are inseparable, and that survival is always written in partnership with the giants that shape the ground beneath our feet. Understanding what dinosaurs were and what they might have become begins not with living herds or roaring predators, but with fragments of stone. The science of paleontology is, at its heart, an exercise in patience. Fossils are not full stories. They are puzzle pieces, often weathered and incomplete, buried in rock layers that have shifted and folded over millions of years. From these fragments, scientists attempt to reconstruct entire worlds, building narratives that stretch back across time. A fossil bone is more than just hardened calcium. It carries clues in its shape, its texture, its placement within the surrounding sediment. The angle of a joint can suggest how a creature moved. The size of a cavity might hint at the strength of its muscles. The microscopic structure of bone can even reveal growth rates, letting us know whether a dinosaur matured quickly or slowly. Each detail adds another brushstroke to the portrait of a creature long gone. But fossils are rare. The process of fossilization is selective, almost unforgiving. For an organism to fossilize, it must be buried quickly after death, often in mud, ash, or sand that shields it from scavengers and decay. Minerals then seep into the remains, replacing organic material over vast stretches of time. Even when conditions are right, only a fraction of life is ever preserved. Most creatures, no matter how large or abundant, vanish without a trace. What paleontologists recover then is not a complete archive, but the scattered notes of a song where most of the melody is missing. This scarcity forces scientists into the realm of inference. When they discover a partial skeleton, they compare it with known relatives, filling gaps by analogy. If one dinosaur is found with feathers, it raises the possibility that related species might have shared similar traits. If a fossil shows signs of nesting behavior, others in its family tree might be assumed to have done the same. Paleontology often moves forward not by certainty but by careful speculation, educated guesses tested and retested as new discoveries appear. The work does not end with bones. Fossilized footprints, for instance, can be more revealing than skeletons. A single set of tracks might show how fast an animal moved, how it shifted weight, whether it traveled alone or in a group. Entire trackways preserve the movements of herds, frozen moments that show social behavior impossible to capture in isolated bones. Likewise, fossilized plants, pollen, and even microscopic plankton help reconstruct the ecosystems in which dinosaurs lived. To understand the giants themselves, scientists must also rebuild the stage on which they acted. And yet, for all this scientific rigor, paleontology is inseparable from imagination. The public rarely sees fossils as fragments. They see reconstructions, full-bodied creatures rendered in museum halls, documentaries, and illustrations. These images are themselves a form of storytelling, blending evidence with creativity. Artists and scientists collaborate to flesh out muscles, feathers, and colors that bones alone cannot show. A tooth may suggest a carnivore, but imagination paints the predator in motion, stalking across a sunlit plain. This blend of science and art is not a weakness but a necessity. Without it, fossils remain mute stones. With it, they become windows into lost worlds. Every drawing, every model is a hypothesis in visual form, subject to revision but vital for sparking curiosity and shaping understanding. Even when artists disagree or new evidence overturns old reconstructions, the act of visualizing gives life to science, making it accessible and compelling. Speculation becomes especially powerful when asking questions that fossils cannot directly answer. Questions like, what if dinosaurs never went extinct? In such cases, scientists borrow methods from multiple fields. Evolutionary biology provides models of how traits adapt over time. Ecology suggests how species might fill niches in different environments. Geology explains how continents and climates would shape those opportunities. Together, these disciplines allow researchers to extend beyond what is known into the realm of possibility. The idea of speculative science is not to claim certainty but to test plausibility. If a particular dinosaur had survived, what pressures would it face? Would it shrink to fit tighter environments or grow larger in open plains? Would it develop new ways of feeding, defending itself, or communicating? These are not idle fantasies but structured questions, guided by evolutionary principles. They explore the range of what life can do, reminding us that evolution is not a straight line but a branching tree full of paths that might have been taken. Fossils provide a baseline. They tell us what was. But speculation stretches the timeline forward, asking what could have been. This interplay between evidence and imagination is where science brushes against storytelling most directly. It allows scientists to frame scenarios, while writers and artists extend those scenarios into rich worlds that inspire the public. Popular culture, from novels to films, thrives on this tension, taking the skeletons of ancient creatures and breathing them into lives that could never be fully proved. Museums often become the middle ground where this dialogue plays out. Visitors see fossil skeletons arranged in lifelike poses, often alongside murals or models that depict entire environments. These spaces merge science and speculation, inviting people to walk among the giants of the past while recognizing the fragmentary nature of the evidence. For many, such encounters are formative, sparking a lifelong interest in science or history. The sense of awe is not diminished by knowing that parts of the picture are uncertain. If anything, it deepens the wonder, reminding us that discovery is ongoing. Speculation also serves a practical role in research itself. By constructing what-if scenarios, scientists can test their assumptions and refine their methods. For example, asking whether dinosaurs might have developed higher intelligence forces paleontologists to examine how intelligence is measured in the fossil record. It highlights the limits of bone evidence, pushing researchers to consider neurological proxies, like brain cavity size or sensory organ development. Even if the answer remains uncertain, the process of questioning sharpens the science. The line between speculation and storytelling becomes thinner still in education and media. Documentaries often use computer-generated imagery to reconstruct entire worlds, allowing viewers to see dinosaurs moving, feeding, and interacting as if alive. These reconstructions rely on rigorous science, but they also lean on narrative, choosing which behaviors to show, which environments to highlight, which sounds to imagine. A dinosaur shown as a nurturing parent conveys a different message than one shown as a solitary predator. Both may be plausible. The choice is itself a form of storytelling. Through this fusion of evidence and imagination, paleontology has become one of the most engaging sciences. It bridges the gap between data and wonder, inviting both rigorous inquiry and childlike curiosity. The bones may be silent, but the stories built around them continue to speak, carrying across generations. And as we look deeper into the intersection of science and culture, the role of imagination does not diminish, it grows stronger, reminding us that knowledge and narrative are not rivals, but partners in understanding worlds both past and possible. Beyond the laboratories and excavation sites, dinosaurs live just as vividly in culture as in stone. They have become icons not only of prehistory but of imagination itself. In a world where they had never gone extinct, their presence in myth, art, and storytelling would be even deeper, shaping how entire civilizations saw themselves. Every culture creates stories to explain the unknown. In our reality, dragons fill that role, emerging in legends from China to Europe. Many scholars suggest that ancient people, stumbling across fossilized bones, may have woven them into myths of winged monsters and fire-breathing beasts. But if dinosaurs had survived, there would be no need for such leaps of imagination. People would not imagine dragons, they would tell stories about the creatures outside their villages, the ones whose calls echoed across valleys at night. Myths would grow not from guesswork but from direct encounters. reframed through ritual, religion, and symbolism. Imagine the oral traditions of early societies. Instead of tales of wolves or bears, campfire stories might warn of horned giants that guarded rivers or of winged reptiles that carried omens on their broad wings. Folktales could describe heroes who befriended a predator, turning danger into alliance, or gods who rode atop massive reptiles across the sky. Over time, these myths would become foundational to cultural identity, carried forward in songs, carvings, and epic poems. With the rise of written language, dinosaurs would step into literature. Ancient epics, like those of Mesopotamia or Greece, might feature reptilian beasts not as allegories, but as familiar presences, woven into the rhythm of human storytelling. Scrolls and manuscripts could record not only wars and dynasties, but encounters with living fossils, described in tones that blurred fact and myth. Just as lions became symbols of strength and serpents of wisdom or deceit, entire species of dinosaurs might be embedded into human symbolism, each carrying its own associations. As cultures expanded and met one another, these symbols would cross-pollinate. A coastal people might worship marine reptiles as protectors of sailors, while inland societies revered horned dinosaurs as guardians of crops. When traders met, they would not only exchange goods but swap stories, mixing traditions and reshaping myths. The result would be a global tapestry of dinosaur imagery, as rich and varied as the real animals themselves. In the modern age, the relationship between science and storytelling would only deepen. Our actual history shows how quickly dinosaurs captured public imagination once their fossils were studied. In the 19th century, as paleontology grew, artists filled museums and books with reconstructions that mesmerized the public. In this alternate world, such fascination would not need fossils. It would draw directly from lived experience, with writers, painters, and musicians weaving dinosaurs into their creations, as naturally as we depict cats, horses, or whales. Novels might explore the politics of cities, where dinosaurs walked alongside people, blending fiction with commentary on human society. Poets could describe the grace of flying reptiles against the moon, turning them into metaphors for freedom or fate. Theater might stage dramas where herds of giants thundered across painted backdrops, a living chorus of sound and spectacle. The arts would thrive on the tension between fear and admiration, danger and beauty, turning dinosaurs into timeless muses. Film and television, when they arrived, would elevate this further. In our timeline, blockbusters like Jurassic Park fired global imagination by resurrecting dinosaurs through science fiction. But in a world where they had never died, cinema would not need resurrection. Instead, filmmakers could place cameras directly on the plains, capturing herds in migration or predators in pursuit. Documentaries would feel like epics, and epics would feel like documentaries. Fiction might focus less on whether dinosaurs could return and more on how humans lived with them. Comedies, romances, even thrillers set against landscapes where giants moved in the background. Speculative fiction would still have its place. Writers might imagine alternate realities where dinosaurs had gone extinct, spinning tales of strange worlds where mammals ruled uncontested. To them, such a scenario would be the what if, a reversal of ours. Science fiction could build futures where humans and dinosaurs together colonized other planets, carrying their shared legacy into the stars. Fantasy might recast familiar creatures in magical terms, granting wings to sauropods, or turning predators into guardians of enchanted realms. The possibilities would multiply endlessly, each shaped by the enduring fascination with creatures that refuse to vanish. Yet speculation does more than entertain. It reflects who we are. Stories about dinosaurs often serve as mirrors, projecting our hopes and fears onto beings far older than ourselves. A tale about a nurturing dinosaur parent might echo our own concerns about family and survival. A story about an unstoppable predator could embody anxieties about nature's power or human fragility. Even in fiction, the way we depict dinosaurs says less about them than about us, revealing what we value, what we fear, and how we see our place in the world. Education, too, would blur with storytelling. Teachers might use dinosaur myths to spark curiosity, blending fact and legend into lessons that connected science with culture. Museums could host exhibitions that placed fossils beside cultural artifacts, showing how people across time understood the same creatures through different lenses. Scientists might collaborate with artists not only to illustrate findings but to explore the emotional resonance of their work, recognizing that wonder is as important as data in inspiring future generations. The dialogue between science and storytelling would also shape public debates. In conservation, arguments for protecting certain species might lean on their cultural significance as much as on ecological necessity. When governments pass laws to safeguard habitats, campaigners could point not only to biodiversity, but to centuries of stories that bound people to these creatures. The power of myth would become a political tool, guiding policy and shaping collective will. In this way, science and speculation form a cycle. Discoveries fuel imagination. Imagination inspires new questions, and those questions drive further discoveries. The process never ends, because each new fragment of bone, each new story, opens doors to possibilities we had not considered before. Far from being opposites, science and storytelling are allies, each giving the other meaning and momentum. As we follow this cycle, we begin to see why questions like "what if dinosaurs never went extinct" resonate so strongly. They are not only about creatures long gone or alternate timelines, they are about us, about how we imagine ourselves, how we measure our resilience, and how we dream of what could have been. These stories remind us that knowledge is not static. It grows, shifts, and evolves, much like the life it seeks to understand. And so, the tale moves forward, from fragments of fossils and flights of imagination to something larger, reflections on survival itself, on chance and fragility, on the single moment that gave mammals and ultimately humans their place in the sun. There is a strange comfort in realizing how improbable our presence truly is. The fact that humans exist at all rests on an event that happened 66 million years ago. The impact of an asteroid striking the Earth near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. In a matter of hours, ecosystems that had thrived for over 100 million years collapsed. Forests burned, skies darkened, oceans shifted, species that had defined entire eras vanished. And in that moment of destruction, a door quietly opened for others. Without that asteroid, the story of life on Earth might have looked entirely different. Dinosaurs, still powerful and diverse, might have continued to dominate. Mammals, our own ancestors, were small and largely nocturnal, hiding in shadows and cracks, waiting for opportunities that rarely came. Their survival was not guaranteed, and their expansion was not inevitable. It was chance, a cosmic accident that changed the balance. Chance is difficult for us to accept. Human history is often told as if it were destined, a steady climb from caves to cities to satellites. But biology does not work like that. Evolution is not a ladder, but a branching tree, with countless paths cut short. Our species sits on one branch that survived not because it was the strongest, but because disaster cleared space for it to grow. If the asteroid had struck at a different angle, or missed the planet entirely, we might not be here to wonder about it. The Earth would still be full of life, but life of another kind, shaped by giants who never surrendered their place. When we reflect on survival, we must also reflect on fragility. Dinosaurs ruled for over 160 million years, far longer than humans have existed. Their reign seemed unshakable, their adaptations unmatched. Yet a single event, unfolding over days and years, ended it. If such a dominant lineage could fall, what does that say about us? We have lived as a species for only a fraction of that time, and yet we often speak as though our place on Earth is permanent. The truth is humbling. Permanence is an illusion. Civilizations rise and fall, species appear and vanish, and the planet itself changes constantly. Mountains erode, seas advance and retreat, climates shift. Survival depends not on control, but on adaptation, on finding ways to endure change rather than resist it. Dinosaurs could not adapt quickly enough to a world thrown into chaos, and so they disappeared. Mammals found niches to exploit and grew into them. Humanity, much later, arose in that space. But survival is not only about biology. It is also about memory, about how we interpret the past. We look back at the asteroid impact and see tragedy for the dinosaurs, but also opportunity for ourselves. Yet if another species were telling the story, their perspective might be very different. A bird, descendant of small feathered dinosaurs that survived the catastrophe, might see it as continuity, not loss. For them, the line never broke. Their ancestors endured, adapted, and still fill the skies. From their vantage point, the Earth remains a dinosaur's planet, only in altered form. This duality, loss and survival, fragility and resilience, is at the heart of reflection. Life is both vulnerable and persistent, fragile in moments, but enduring across ages. The asteroid reminds us that endings can also be beginnings, that collapse can clear the way for renewal, but it also reminds us that no lineage, however strong, is beyond risk. In that sense, the dinosaurs are not simply a story of extinction. They are a mirror, showing us what it means to exist on a planet where chance rules as much as strength. When scientists study mass extinctions, they often note patterns. After great losses, ecosystems reorganize. New species appear to fill the empty roles, reshaping the balance of life. In our case, the mammals took on those roles, and eventually humans rose among them. But this pattern also raises questions about our future. If another catastrophe occurred, whether from space, climate, or our own actions, what would follow us? Which species would adapt, and which would vanish? The story of survival is not finished. It is ongoing, and we are part of its current chapter. Thinking this way shifts how we see ourselves. Instead of the inevitable rulers of Earth, we become temporary participants in a much larger drama. Our existence feels less like destiny and more like a borrowed moment, a pause granted by chance. This realization is not meant to diminish us, but to place us in perspective. It is easy to imagine we are the end point of evolution, but in truth we are only one possibility realized among countless that could have been. The asteroid simply made room for us to grow. And so, reflection turns inward. How do we use this borrowed moment? What does it mean to live knowing that our place is not guaranteed? Some find the thought unsettling, a reminder of mortality on a grand scale. Others find it freeing, an invitation to see life as precious precisely because it is fleeting. Fragility does not erase meaning. If anything, it sharpens it, giving weight to choices and urgency to care. Just as scientists learn from the fossil record, we can learn from the patterns of survival. Adaptability, cooperation, and awareness of the environment are keys not only to species enduring, but to civilizations thriving. The dinosaurs teach us that dominance is not enough, that scale and power do not ensure safety. What matters is how life responds to change, how it finds ways to persist in shifting worlds. For humans, that lesson is more relevant than ever, as we face challenges of climate, biodiversity, and our own impact on the Earth. The asteroid impact is a reminder written in stone, a signal from the deep past that chance shapes destiny. Without it, we might never have appeared. With it, we gained the opportunity to exist, to think, to imagine. Our reflections on that event are also reflections on ourselves, fragile, fortunate, and forever tied to a planet that has been both cradle and crucible. And as we continue the story, the question lingers. Not only what came before us, but what will come after. If survival is shaped by chance, then the story of life is also a story of perspective. Looking back across deep time, we can see patterns: flourishing diversity, sudden collapse, gradual renewal. But within each of those patterns are countless individual lives, lived with no awareness of the larger arc. A dinosaur, grazing at the edge of a swamp, did not know it was part of a dynasty that would last millions of years. A small mammal hiding in the dark did not know its descendants would one day build cities. Perspective comes only later, when we connect the fragments and see the sweep of history. For us, living in the present, reflection is both gift and burden. We know more about the past than any species before us, and that knowledge comes with the unsettling awareness of impermanence. To imagine the asteroid's impact is to imagine how suddenly the world can change. A morning of calm skies, an afternoon of falling fire, and a night where entire lineages began to fade. That reminder lingers, The ordinary can tip into the extraordinary without warning, and yet, fragility is only half the picture. The other half is resilience. Life has endured through multiple mass extinctions, each time finding ways to adapt, diversify, and flourish again. From bacteria to forests, from reptiles to mammals, the planet has never been emptied completely. Even the asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs did not erase life, it only reshuffled it. That dual truth, vulnerability and resilience, gives us a balanced lens for seeing our place in the world. We often imagine catastrophe as final, but history shows it is also transitional. Species vanish, but ecosystems reform. New lineages rise, carrying forward the energy of survival. In this sense, chance does not only destroy, it also creates. The asteroid gave mammals their opportunity, just as earlier extinctions had once cleared paths for reptiles. Extinction and evolution are not separate forces, but parts of the same rhythm, a cycle of loss and renewal that has played out again and again. Knowing this, our reflections turn toward the future. If chance opens space for us, what role will we play in shaping what comes next? Unlike the dinosaurs, we can anticipate risks. We know about asteroids that pass near Earth, about changes in climate, about the fragility of biodiversity. Our awareness gives us tools to prepare, to adapt deliberately rather than react blindly. That awareness is both our strength and our responsibility. It is tempting to see ourselves as outside of nature, as controllers rather than participants. But the lesson of the dinosaurs is that dominance is never absolute. They were the giants of their age, and yet a shift in the skies ended their reign. For us, dominance brings not invincibility, but accountability. The more we alter the planet, the more we tie our fate to the systems we disrupt. Reflection then becomes a guide. If survival is not guaranteed, we must live in ways that increase the chance of endurance, for ourselves, for other species, and for the planet that sustains us. At the same time, reflection brings humility. We are not the inevitable rulers of Earth, but beneficiaries of chance. Every city, every story, every moment of thought exists because of a cosmic event that could have unfolded differently. That awareness softens our sense of certainty. It encourages gratitude, a recognition that life itself is improbable and therefore precious. In the quiet of night, when we consider the stars, we can remember that our place beneath them is not guaranteed, and that makes it all the more extraordinary. Philosophers and poets often remind us that awareness of fragility deepens meaning. A flower is beautiful not despite its short life, but because of it. In the same way, our awareness of extinction does not diminish the value of existence, it heightens it. Knowing that civilizations can fall and species can vanish adds weight to every act of kindness, every pursuit of knowledge, every choice to protect what we love. The asteroid reminds us that tomorrow is never certain, and that makes today matter even more. There is also comfort in recognizing continuity. While the great reptiles of the Mesozoic vanished, their lineage did not end entirely. Birds remain as living reminders, filling skies with movement and song. In their presence, we see a thread unbroken, a testament to resilience that stretches from ancient forests to modern cities. When we hear birdsong at dawn, we are listening to voices shaped by survival through catastrophe. Their existence is proof that life, though fragile, is never entirely lost. Reflection also brings imagination. If chance could so radically alter the past, it can also alter the future. What worlds might come after us? What species might rise if we falter? These are not only scientific questions, but invitations to humility, to see ourselves as part of a larger unfolding rather than its final chapter. Whether humans endure for millions of years or only a fraction, the cycle of life will continue. The Earth does not pause when one lineage ends. It keeps writing new stories, shaped by chance, resilience, and time. As the thought deepens, we begin to see survival itself as a kind of shared inheritance. We carry within us the luck of ancestors who endured ice ages, droughts, and predators. We carry the fortune of living in a moment carved open by catastrophe long before we existed, and we carry the responsibility of what we will leave behind. Just as the asteroids shaped the future for mammals, our choices now will shape the future for whatever comes next. In that sense, reflection is not only backward-looking but forward-reaching. It asks us to imagine a future where life continues, where the cycle of chance and adaptation writes its next chapter. It asks us to act with awareness, knowing that fragility is not a flaw, but a feature of existence, one that demands care. And it asks us to hold both truths together, that we are fortunate to be here, and that our fortune is not forever. As the story of dinosaurs reminds us, survival is never a certainty. It is a gift, borrowed from time and chance, sustained by adaptation and resilience. To reflect on that gift is to honor it, not with certainty, but with humility and wonder. And in that wonder, there is peace. The same peace that comes from knowing the stars burn far longer than we do, yet we still find meaning in their life. The same peace that comes from knowing that while our branch of the tree may someday end, the tree itself will continue to grow. And so, as the story of what might have been draws to a close, the reflection lingers, not only on dinosaurs or asteroids or the fragile path that brought us here, but on the simple fact of being alive now, in this moment. A chance made room for us. What we do with that chance is our story to write, fragile, fleeting, but no less extraordinary.